Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. We may have heard, but the National Weather Service is celebrating its 150th anniversary, and I want to just go through one really cool bit of the history of this. You see, in 1870, President Ulysses S. Grant created a weather service, which was within the Army Signal Service, a part of the Department of Commerce. And through that Signal Service, we started collecting just lots and lots of weather information across the country, primarily because of the invention of the telegraph. With time, going about 20 years forward here, President Harrison created a civil weather service, which was called the Weather Bureau, and it moved out of the Department of Commerce over to the Department of Agriculture, where it lived until 1940 before coming back to the Department of Commerce. Now, between 1940 and 1970, some very amazing things happened in terms of the history of the Weather Service. One, in 1970, NOAA formed and the Weather Bureau got renamed. It became the National Weather Service. And it was because of this explosion of incredible research done during World War II, then the 1950s, post-World War II, and then the space race of the 1960s. And that is where the birth of such great research in atmospheric sciences really, truly took off. Now, in the 1950s, specifically 1950, we had our first tornado alerts that were issued by the Weather Bureau. And in 1951, the Severe Warning Center was formed at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma. And this happened because with the ending of World War I and the decommissioning of several ship radars, we were actually being able to observe some pretty amazing weather events around the world with radar. And one of those is right over here on the right. This is one of my favorites. This happened right here in Champaign, Illinois. That is the very first ever hook echo detected on April 9th, 1953 by our radar in, like I said, in Champaign, Illinois. And why this was so significant is because of the graph that I've embedded here. You see, going back to 1940 all the way to 2018, you're looking at the annual number of tornado fatalities in the United States. And you can see that before about 1975, we'll come right in through here, it was common to have tornado outbreaks that could kill 100 to up to 400 people. But because of all of this technological increase, including radar, including the invention of geostationary satellites, which were launched in the 1970s, and the beginning of numerical weather prediction, for a long time we saw very few fatalities compared to past from tornadoes. But this does not mean we can get away from massive outbreaks like the one that happened in April 2011, where we had over 700 reported tornadoes in April 27th and 28th, showing up as two of the deadliest days in tornado history here. But I show you all of this because I want to take you back to that whole idea I had last Thursday about dates that meteorologists remember. And yesterday was the anniversary of the March 18th, 1925 tri-state tornado. Now, currently on record, this is the longest lived tornado. It is over 219 miles in its full track, and at times it was said to go up to 70 miles an hour. Now, some current research may suggest that this was a family of tornadoes, not one single tornado, but we won't ever be able to go back to reconstruct that. So at this point, it is the longest lived tornado. Unfortunately, it killed 695 people, making it the deadliest single tornado in U.S. history, and gave us such incredible iconic images like this one, where it appears that a 1x4 got shoved here through looks like a 2x6, and just impressive to see what these winds were. Now, we don't actually have an F-scale rating for this tornado because Dr. Ted Fujita hadn't released his scale until 1971. But when we went back and looked at some of the damage, this was easily been ranked an F5 on his scale. Now, here's another date. Remember I told you about the superstorm in 1993 on March 12th and 13th, and then the massive winter storm we had a year ago on March 12th and 13th? Well, let me take you back to March 12th, 2006. This was the date where the record was set for the longest lived supercell. It was around for almost 18 hours, and it tracked almost 1,000 miles, and it produced a family of tornadoes, which added to the daily total of 140 separate reports of tornadoes, one of the most active days. And I believe, if I think back right, this was a Sunday. And one of those supercells started in Oklahoma, went through Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan. and it did that riding along a warm front. And that's oftentimes how in the Midwest we get some of our biggest tornado outbreaks in the Midwest. In the Southwest, it's all about the dry line. Well, last night, Texas was the host to all the tornado activity. And you're watching here just a radar animation that goes through very early this morning, about 3 a.m. when I was recording this. So I don't yet have any details out of, in terms of the number of tornadoes, any injuries, fatalities, or damages here. But this is the leading edge of the second part of that wave we've now been talking about for a while that came out of California, is now pushing into the midsection of the United States. And about 1:47 this morning, I was watching the radar here. This is just north of Abilene, and you can see some impressive structure. Look at that hook echo right there on the southwest side of the storm and the well-defined hail core. So I think as the morning goes on and we start to see some of the damage from these overnight storms, we might see some pretty rough spots down here in parts of Texas, and it was a very rough night indeed. Well, as we get our way into the day on Thursday and beyond, this is what is becoming a more and more colorful map. In fact, since I started preparing this briefing very early this morning, I've seen the National Weather Service is up with me, making quite a few changes to it. And what we're watching here, let's just go north to south. We have some light snow on the northern side of this, but we've increased the area where we have winter weather advisories because we're concerned in this area today about potentially for some ice before some more snow pulls through here. There's a lot of this region that is covered in kind of I think it's a pinkish or a salmon color that represents high wind warnings, but you can clearly see back in this area blizzard warnings, winter storm warnings, and winter weather advisories. Still have, as of about 3 o'clock this morning, tornado watches in this part of Texas, and the flood watches have now been extended like we talked about yesterday, getting into the parts of the Ohio River Valley. And the system that's coming out today is going to be quite problematic with severe weather. So let's talk about this. This is the latest update. Now, this is the early one from this morning from the National Weather Service's Storm Prediction Center. And it's not too much of a change from yesterday afternoon. A large region where we have enhanced risk of severe storms. And it's going to have two plays to it. One will be back here on the main warm front, and the second will be here on the upper level front as it pushes through. And I want to diagnose all of this to show you why there's such a large region where we have a slight risk for severe storms today. First thing is going to be this rather expansive and quite broad warm sector ahead of this storm. So as the upper level wave emerges here, it's going to push warm air, and I'll just kind of outline where at least 60-degree weather is going to be today. And we might be pressing through parts of Kansas, Missouri, southern Illinois, and Indiana deep into the 70s. And this helps to warm up the lower levels of the atmosphere while the upper levels of the atmosphere stay cold, and that helps to destabilize the atmosphere. But take a look at what the dew point temperatures are doing. You know you've got to have adequate surface-based moisture to produce big thunderstorms. And what we generally say is dew points above 60 degrees is a pretty good indicator of having adequate moisture. We can see where that dry line is going to be. It's sitting right back here with the main low pushing through parts of Nebraska and Kansas, and the warm frontal boundary extended out ahead of this. The main cold front will be way on the backside, way over here to start off. We'll see how it presses through later. So we certainly have a three-front system that's moving out here. Very dry and extremely windy on the back side of this, with a lot of moisture being pulled out of the Gulf of Mexico on the front side of this. So the atmosphere will destabilize. And what we're looking at here is through late this afternoon what our surface-based CAPE. So remember, CAPE is a measure of total potential energy in the atmosphere. And where that warm, moist sector sits, we can see values here getting up in the 1,000 to up to 3,000 joules per kilogram range. And that's going to be the fuel allowing for these storms to rise into the afternoon sky or the evening sky. What's got me most concerned is actually this map, because as everything else comes together, we need to see what our wind shear profile looks like. So late this evening, we're looking here at wind speeds about a mile above our heads. And we can see that the wind direction is generally in this direction here and pulling around like that here. But these wind speeds in this part of Illinois and Indiana, back into Missouri, are quite strong, and they are certainly screaming out of the southwest. We call that the low-level jet. Now, the main wave is still sitting back here by late this afternoon, and that is, believe it or not, the system that went through California, which increased snowpack in the Sierra Nevada by up to 20% over what it was. So that's that wave right there, and it'll slowly, throughout the day today, be moving toward Illinois. And it's always on the lead side of this that we watch for the best upper-level support as the heights fall in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, giving us more instability. And screaming over the top of it, take a look at this jet streak in through here, where we're going to see wind speeds that'll be climbing here above about 120 knots at times right in through this area. So you're just seeing the ingredients coming together to make for a rough day in terms of severe weather inside that region that the Storm Prediction Center identified. So what I'd like to do now is I want to go back to the 0Z HER run. That stands for High Resolution Rapid Refresh. And I want to show you how this system evolved overnight and what it's going to be doing this morning. So here we go in the overnight hours, what it did in parts of Texas, which we talked about. We have a push out ahead of this as the warm air advances to the north by 7 o'clock this morning, spreading rain through parts of Oklahoma, Missouri, and then on the backside here into parts of Iowa and Nebraska. So this is going to start off rain here while the snow is flying in this part of Colorado and western Nebraska over here. So early this morning. Now what we're going to watch is that lead front push through by 11 o'clock, bringing widespread rain into this area while we're very quickly converting over to snow on the backside. Now after that pushes through and we broaden out and that warm sector right here, there we go, 3 o'clock, can you start to see the scattered storms developing in this area? This is the region we're going to watch initially for our bigger storms. As we work our way into the afternoon and eventually evening hours, our attention is going to turn to watch for storms and their potential to fire here in Iowa. My greatest concern with these storms right now is, yes, they could rotate, but I think we could have some big hail issues right here in this part of Iowa. So watch the radar carefully. Keep an eye for those pink and purple colored pixels, which would indicate hail. Now, the other sector of this storm we're concerned about is here along the upper level front. And as it pulls through parts of Illinois and Indiana, we can see where the HER model, let's just outline it here, was identifying by 8 o'clock this evening where the potential for storms are going to be. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. This is just one model simulation. We're going to watch all day long to keep up with the timing of this. So this will certainly be a nowcasted event, which means you're going to have to watch it while it unfolds. We're just kind of giving you an idea on where I'm most concerned. So here and here. And as we pull through the late evening hours, we continue to see in this pocket here. So we could have late into the evening into the overnight hours more strong to severe storms. But on the backside of this, pulling through Nebraska, this part of Iowa, and up here into parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin, we're going to watch out for snow to move through that area. Well, what took several days to leave California takes just a day to go from Texas all the way to Canada. And it's going to leave a frontal boundary sitting right here on which we're going to add quite a bit more rainfall. And that rainfall is going to add to this map. So this was valid at midnight or 12 a.m. this morning. And we can see that those storms that went through in the overnight hours are adding this morning to the total rainfall that we had over the last week here. And there's a broad swath in northern Texas, southern Oklahoma that's seen 4 to 8 inches in some locations of rain. So this is all adding into this area. In California, we're not done yet. We've got more coming out west very, very soon. Now to show you that snow, I want you to watch the NAM model. So we're going to let this play and pause it right here. This is 11 o'clock this morning. So you can see the big snows on the back side of this system, and this is where we get the conversion here over towards snow in western Nebraska. Now before this gets here, let's go back to early this morning. In this part of North and South Dakota, can you see the ice that's coming in through here? This is why they issued the winter weather advisory for this area with light snow to the north of it. Now after that, let's get to mid-morning and mid-afternoon. This is valid 5 o'clock this afternoon. Right here along this boundary I'm drawing will be the conversion over to snow. We could potentially see some heavy snow in parts of Nebraska, southeastern Wyoming, and northeastern Colorado. So getting now from 5 to 9 o'clock this evening, getting into 1 a.m. tomorrow morning on Friday, you can see the conversion over to snow moving through parts of Iowa here. And then as the system pulls north, it yanks that snow through the Wisconsin, the UP of Michigan, and the northern part of lower Michigan here. And again, like we said, the frontal boundary lingers, bringing more rainfall to this area down here. Meanwhile, out west, we still saw more shower activity through the San Joaquin Valley, even after this system kind of moves through, and you can see it right there through early Saturday morning. All right? Okay. All in all, this is how much snow we're expecting from the European model. The biggest snows are going to be back in Colorado And we see a swath right in through here of possibly getting anywhere between 2 and 5 inches of snow, with maybe some locally heavier amounts in a narrow corridor right in the center. This is the snow that moved through overnight into parts of North Dakota, and we're going to talk about a system coming out here that might hit Minnesota later. Now, I'm going to leave Northeast, what's changing here over the Northeast, out of this forecast. We're going to put it into tomorrow's regional update. Andrew's going to give you that update here. But I want to get to the next system that's coming down here early next week that's going to hit the West Coast again, because that one has the potential for adding quite a bit more snow to the Sierra Nevada, helping to make up that deficit and continuing to build the snowpack in the Intermountain West, which is a critical part of our spring and early summer weather patterns out west. So in total, through next Thursday morning, you're looking now at a snapshot from the European model on total accumulated precipitation. We are filling in an area down here that up to this point was dry as you got closer to the coast with a lot of precipitation. And this is certainly adding a lot to the saturated soils that currently cover the Missouri, Mississippi, and Ohio River valleys and all of their tributaries. So you can see here that we've got a pretty wet pattern through next Thursday. But remember, a lot of this is coming now and at the beginning of the weekend. So what's changing in this pattern? Well, let's just go straight to the upper levels of the atmosphere for next week. First thing, we're going to be watching two troughs. See one here and here. They're ultimately a part of that omega pattern we have been discussing. These two troughs will be sweeping into the western United States and kind of combining forces to increase precipitation chances through much of the week next week for the western United States. Meanwhile, some of us in the midsection are going to get a little bit of a break as we're waiting on this wave to come out. When does it finally do that? Well, look, by middle and end of next week, the upper level flow pattern features a large ridge building over parts of the Aleutian Islands. We've lost our omega pattern with the greatest center of colds tucked away right here, kind of in the Canadian archipelago and up here over the Arctic. Now, what's concerning about this is if we do, in fact, leave a persistent trough feature into this section of the U.S., well, with the air flowing around it, over this ridge over the southeast, this just tends to keep much of the United States with quite active weather. And unfortunately, it brings quite a bit of colder air out of Alaska into the Canadian prairies temporarily. We're going to talk about that in a few moments. But what I'm seeing here is that with time, we're elongating in the European ensemble a ridge across the North Pacific. We're keeping stacked right here in the lower levels a deep trough, and sitting on top of it is the polar vortex in the stratosphere. They're not exactly coupled at this point, but they're stacked, which is going to trap that cold air over Alaska. And that's something I want to talk about because I go all the way out to day 15 starting April. And we tend to see that our deepest trough features have now moved back over the Arctic and over Alaska. And that may signal a bit of a pattern change. And we need to know what that means for temperatures across the Canadian prairies in the lower 48. And what does it mean for precipitation as we begin our new month of April? So with that, let's go straight over to the operational European model. We've seen system number 1. Let's let it pull through there. So let's just watch that again real quick and pause it right here. So we see that pulling through. This is now Friday morning, Friday afternoon, and evening, and there's the lingering frontal boundary in the back side. Now, much of the central part of the United States stretching to the southeast goes into a cooler weekend. You can see the big high-pressure cell. It's dry, but it's going to be a cooler weekend in this section of the country. And that frontal boundary pushes all the way down here, and it'll only be along its periphery that we see more precipitation. So we're going to hit parts of southeastern Texas over toward Louisiana with late night Saturday night showers getting into Sunday morning rainfall in this area. So that's the main story, this big high pressure cell moving across the lower 48 after this. Watch out on Sunday afternoon for a chance for showers here in parts of Missouri and even some light snow in this part of Montana. But like I said, on Sunday getting into Monday, as we're watching that rainfall push through parts of the mid-south here, okay, our attention goes back over to the west. One trough is here, a second trough is here, and you're going to see that going from Monday morning into Monday afternoon, we've got a pretty complex situation setting up across the lower 48. The combination of two systems meeting together here in the western United States, and with the exiting high pressure cell and the baroclinic zone sitting along the east coast, we're going to keep a very close eye out on the potential for what might be one of the first nor'easters of the season. Now, details about this are still unfolding, and you can expect to see a lot of variation in model runs between now and next Monday night and Tuesday morning. The current operational European model puts the low pressure center right here just off of Long Island, and therefore there could be enough cold air on the backside of this to bring snow to the interior, but much closer to the coast. Andrew's going to update you tomorrow on what to expect out of this system if you're watching my video in the Northwest, but this is the current operational European model. So you noticed much of the Midwest got a relatively drier stretch of days from Saturday through, well, Tuesday morning. But you're going to see with that deeper trough developing, more systems ejecting into the central part of the United States. This is now Tuesday afternoon. Here's the first one pulling through the Midwest. Tuesday evening, moving through the Ohio River Valley by Wednesday morning. And then that main wave, which is keeping very wet and snowy conditions across the west. It's just a big wave over here. It looks like it's going to pull out next Thursday into Friday across the midsection of the country. But details are still forthcoming with this, which is why looking at this operational model beyond a week is going to be giving us more error this far out. So what I want to do then is just kind of show you week 2 only. So we went up 1 week. What about what's following that? Well, with the changes happening over Alaska, the European model is favoring wetter conditions in British Columbia through the Pacific Northwest. Near average precipitation coming in through this area, but possibly drier getting into this part of California. You might be looking at this if you're living here and farming in the midsection of the United States going, great, a drier time period. But I want to tell you that it's not. We have systems rolling through. They're just not to the magnitude of the ones we saw recently, especially the one that's going through today. But all of this meets from parts of the lower Mississippi River Valley through the Northeast, keeping this whole sector wet into week 2, and that's been a consistent signal in the models. So from there, let's talk about temperatures. This is a snapshot at departure from normal temperatures today. You can see the full warm sector of this next storm system developing with the very cold air on the back side of it. As we play this forward, what we're going to notice here is as we get into the day on Friday, you can now see the cold front advancing, 20 to 25 degrees colder than average here in parts of Nebraska. The whole of the western half of the United States showing up colder than the average except for the Northwest. Now pushing from there into Saturday and Sunday, those will be the 2 coldest days for the eastern 2/3 of the United States out of this system. But remember, we're reloading back out west as the nor'easter pulls off here. And watch this. This is now Monday's departure from normal, Tuesday departure from normal, and Wednesday. So we're already warming that sector back up. So it's just a brief shot at colder air over the weekend. Now, I want to show you the extent of the freezing air on Saturday. We see it makes it this far into Texas Saturday morning, stretching right through parts of Kentucky up toward the Northeast. So that's your Saturday morning lows with bitterly cold air sitting here over the north central plains in Minnesota. And Sunday morning, we can see it sitting right in through here is where our freezing line is going to be. So I wanted to point that out just as an added part to this temperature discussion. But looking longer term, this is now day 5 through 10. Remember that it was at that point that we see the deeper trough developing out west, keeping things very snowy in the mountains and then letting systems kind of eject into the central plains. But as they pull north and east, generally it's a warmer pattern for the eastern half of North America. And look at this, day 10 through 15, very consistent picture with the upper level flow, keeping the coldest air as the trough reestablishes over parts of the northern parts of Canada, into the Canadian archipelago, and up into parts of Alaska. And we've seen the models pretty consistently keeping this area with near average to above average temperatures on the whole as we work our way out into the beginning of April. What has happened is this has backed off on the cold anomalies out west as well. To finish this up, I just want to give you a brief update about South America. We have seen a lowering of some of the estimates of first crop soybeans and safrinha crop corn simply because of the drier conditions, which we talked about earlier this week down in Brazil's southern growing regions, specifically Paraná, which is here, and Rio Grande do Sul, which is there. Now, the map I'm drawing on is the next 7 days from the European ensemble, looking at departure from normal precipitation. So a drier time period in Argentina and southern Brazil, while northern Brazil growing regions are showing up wet. Looking out to week 2, which is over here on the right, we continue to see southern Brazil showing up dry, while a pattern change in South America showing wetter conditions extending like this out into the ocean and wetter conditions in this part of Brazil is going to have to be watched and diagnosed very carefully. I'm going to spend time over the weekend trying to figure out if we've shifted things in South America and if that's going to lead to more crop loss, especially in Brazil's southern growing regions. So, a lot to take in today. Thank you for your attention. Hope you found this informative, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow morning. Thank you.